40 years ago, they told him he was too old. Clint Eastwood is still producing films at the age of 94, but he is seeing a lady who is half his age. He begins his insane daily routine at 5 in the morning with an exercise regimen that would kill most people in their 30s. He recently purchased another multi-million-dollar house because it looked good. He has his own helicopter, and he despises birthday celebrations. At 94, Hollywood's toughest cowboy isn't just getting by, he's leading an extravagant life that even his own children find unbelievable. Really, you're not that hefty. You are also welcome to visit my office at any time. It was not intended for Clint Eastwood to become a legend. Actually, his early existence was entirely contradictory. It's a common misconception that he was born into poverty. He was so large that nurses dubbed him Samson when he was born on May 31, 1930, weighing over 11 pounds. His family was well off in Piedmont, California, a posh community. They owned a country club membership, 2 automobiles, and a swimming pool. His mother was able to trace their family history back to the Mayflower. However, despite all of that advantages, Clint's journey wasn't simple. Furthermore, a lot of his later developed tough blue-collar reputation wasn't entirely accurate. It was a component of the persona he developed in order to thrive in Hollywood. School was difficult for me as a child. He had to retake a grade after failing junior high. Teachers at Oakland Technical High saw something unique about him, particularly when he performed. Clint, however, disregarded their counsel. He was too preoccupied with pursuing females and vehicles. According to his academic records, he was more interested in fixing engines than in completing assignments. Some of his buddies even believed that he never received his diploma. One item, nevertheless, suggested that he was an artist. He was a professional pianist. He worked on it until his fingers ached, learning challenging material that most teenagers wouldn't like to learn. He would eventually use the same emphasis to compose music for his own films. Clint didn't pursue acting right out of high school. He did some really crazy jobs. He once worked in Oregon taming wild logs, a profession where one mistake might be fatal. He was enlisted into the Army after that. He earned additional money as a bouncer and lifeguard while stationed at Fort Ord. He even broke up a knife fight one night. However, 1951 was the actual turning moment. He was on a Navy plane that crashed close to Point Reyes. It wasn't over after the collision. He had to swim over 2 miles in shark-infested icy water. Later on, he dubbed it stark terror. He was affected by the encounter. He used that very moment as inspiration for the cold water escape sequence in Escape from Alcatraz, which he appeared in years later. His acting career didn't get off to a great start. He got a small part in the low-budget monster film Revenge of the Creature in 1955. He portrayed Jennings, an anxious lab technician whose most memorable experience was losing a rat. The filmmaker wasn't afraid to display the sequence even though he detested it. Clint needed 15 takes to get it right, yet he only had 28 lines. He received $75 a week, and Universal almost stopped showing him. This uncomfortable guy fumbling with a lab coat would become one of the biggest stars in movie history, but no one on set knew it. I am prepared to veto any tax increase that Congress may even consider proposing, regardless of how well-meaning they may be, or how delusional they may be. Regarding the tax hikes, I have just one thing to say: make my day, please. After only 18 months, Universal Pictures terminated his contract in the middle of the 1950s. They believed he wasn't suitable for the screen. The justifications were nearly absurd. His speech was too sluggish, his Adam's apple was too large, and he refused to replace a damaged tooth. Burt Reynolds was fired at about the same time. Reynolds quipped, "You're really screwed because I can learn to act," as they stood in the Universal parking lot. That Adam's apple is irreplaceable. Eastwood would return to the same studio years later, but this time he would be a $1 million star. He had to return as a leading man to the same place that had cast him aside. Then came the turning point in the story. Robert Sparks, a CBS executive, once saw Clint in the studio cafeteria when he was speaking with an NBC story editor. He was tall and handsome, Sparks thought. Following that fleeting gaze, there was a meeting, a screen test, and ultimately a leading part in Rawhide, a Western television series. Being at the right location and gazing in the right direction at the right time was sheer luck. All of a sudden, the man who had been rejected for his appearance and easygoing demeanor was being praised for the same qualities. Producers were referring to him as a budding star, and his face appeared in TV Guide. He was now drawing millions of people each week with the same sluggish speech and rough demeanor that led to his dismissal. However, Eastwood wasn't even fond of the persona. He accepted it even though he felt Rowdy was too immature. Almost immediately after taking a backup role, he became well known across the country. The show made it into the top 20 TV ratings in just 3 weeks after it aired. However, it was draining behind the scenes. Long hours, 6 days a week, and the scorching Arizona heat. At the end of the show, his income increased from $750 each episode to an incredible $119,000 per episode. Some, however, believed him to be indolent. Directors would schedule their days to accommodate his tardiness. One even said that because Clint was always at least 30 minutes late, he was never included in the opening sequence. Eastwood had had enough by Rawhide's 6th year. He was eager to try something new since he was bored. At that point, he was presented with an odd chance from an unidentified Italian filmmaker producing a low-budget Western in Spain. Since no one in the US took Italian Westerns seriously, the director, Sergio Leone, was adopting a fictitious American name, Bob Robertson. Leone didn't even initially choose Eastwood. None of the major celebrities he had tried to attract, like James Coburn or Henry Fonda, suited the budget. Clint finally consented to do it. He reasoned that since the movie was so modest, no one in America would even notice if it didn't work. Despite the fact that Leone didn't speak English and he didn't speak Italian, he took the risk and went to Spain. To make it work, they relied on interpreters, hand signals, and a great deal of conjecture. Clint Eastwood became a global celebrity because to that film, A Fistful of Dollars. But his performance wasn't the only thing that caught the eye. Eastwood designed his character's whole appearance. The ensemble was not created by a large studio wardrobe crew. He put it together using his personal belongings. He picked up a hat from a thrift shop, repurposed boots and belts from Rawhide, then bleached and roughed up a pair of black Levi's. Even the poncho and little cigars were purchased from sporadic stores he discovered while traveling. The unnamed man's entire atmosphere was intentionally constructed. Eastwood wanted him to communicate mostly through his body language and speak very little. The figure appeared more strong and enigmatic because of the quiet. Additionally, spectators just perceived him as the same silent gunslinger, despite the fact that his name changed from one film to another, Joe Manco, Blondie, etc. They were sold as a trilogy by the studio, and the picture stuck. Critics detested these movies when they eventually came out in the US. They also made a big deal out of it. The original one was dubbed Cheap Jack by some. The second was dopey, according to another. The excellent, the terrible and the ugly were all criticized as revolting disasters in one New York Times review. Eastwood's performance was criticized by Time magazine, which claimed he appeared to be a piece of wood. The audience, however, had the last say. Despite having a budget of about $2 million, the trilogy made nearly $84 million worldwide. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was the only film to earn almost $39 million and sell over 44 million tickets. These spaghetti westerns were popular and spawned an entire genre of films. Before critics finally changed their minds, Eastwood had already altered the rules. Clint Eastwood became more than simply a Hollywood icon. He forced himself into that position and never let it go. When he played Detective Harry Callahan in Dirty Harry in 1971, he made a significant stride toward becoming a superstar. It may surprise you to learn that he was never suited for that post. Frank Sinatra was first offered it, and he worked on it for months before leaving. Paul Newman didn't like the politics, so he passed. Newman, however, did not just decline it. It might be a good fit, he said, passing the screenplay straight to Eastwood. Others also bailed. Sinatra's leftovers were not what John Wayne wanted. It was crap in Robert Mitchum's opinion. Because he had previously portrayed a police officer in Bullitt, Steve McQueen declined. Hollywood's top stars retreated one by one, while Eastwood took the lead. He took a chance by hiring his own director and bringing in his own production firm. Not only did that movie hit, it blew up. Then Eastwood took an unexpected action. He agreed to star in the comedy Every Which Way But Loose in 1978, which followed a street-fighting trucker and his pet orangutan, Clyde. Everyone believed his career would be destroyed. This was Dirty Harry's tough man. And he was looking after a monkey now. Eastwood, however, was unconcerned. He had faith in it. Critics criticized the film, but viewers adored it. It became his biggest hit, and earned over $100 million. The sequel made an additional $70 million, which is even more startling. By today's standards, they earned around $1 billion between them. But there was a sinister undertone to the laughter. After taking donuts from the set, Clyde, the orangutan, was supposedly beaten to death by his trainer. An unsettling conclusion to one of the strangest success stories in Hollywood. For Eastwood, such risk-taking was nothing new. He was making a film about lethal mountain climbing, The Eiger Sanction, in 1975. A climber on the crew was murdered by falling boulders while filming on the north face of the Eiger Mountains. The picture was almost shut down by Eastwood, who was both the director and the actor. Instead, he took a decision that left everyone in disbelief. He would perform all of the risky stunts by himself. Without the type of safety equipment we would expect today, he filmed, dangled from ledges, and scaled cliffs. He put his life at danger for the film at the age of 44. Furthermore, it wasn't even his first near-death experience. During his service days, he had survived a jet crash into shark-infested seas years prior. He then stated that he most likely would have perished from sheer terror if he had been aware of the sharks. Additionally, Eastwood's self-assurance prevented him from pursuing unsuitable parts. In the late 1970s, Superman was presented to him. Superman indeed, but he flatly rejected it. He answered, "That's not for me." James Bond is no different. He would have been the first American to portray 007 if he had agreed. But he was wiser. He was aware of his brand. It wasn't Eastwood who wore tuxedos and tights. He was the man with the rifle and the squint. Clint Eastwood was more than simply a leading man at the end of the decade. He was also a powerful force behind the lens. He held complete control over his films through the Malpaso firm, his own production firm. He wasn't only picking his parts. They were being shaped by him from the ground up. He made changes to the script if it didn't feel correct. He applied further pressure if the studio faltered. He gained a fortune despite the mockery he received for starring in a comedy with a monkey. After years of performing, Clint Eastwood decided to stop following other people's rules in 1971. He desired to be a director, to fully direct the events that took place both in front of and behind the camera. He therefore gave it his all when Play Misty for Me became his directorial debut. No second guessing, no backup plan. The majority of inexperienced filmmakers run late, go over budget, and are enmeshed in studio politics. Eastwood took the opposite action. The entire film was filmed in Carmel by the Sea, his hometown, eschewing elaborate sets in favor of actual places, such as a neighborhood diner and radio station. He completed the film $50,000 under budget and ahead of schedule. He also dictated the parameters for the song. For about $2,000, he personally purchased the rights to Roberta Flack's The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, which went on to become a smash. The movie began Eastwood's filmmaking career with a bang and earned over $10 million. It wasn't pure luck though, it was a plan. Eastwood was already considering the long term in 1967. He and his advisor founded Malpaso Productions because they were fed up with the strict Hollywood system. It was more than a business. There was a message. Malpaso translates to bad step, a reference to the agent who told Eastwood that he would be destroyed by doing spaghetti westerns. Rather, he was able to develop a creative empire and purchase hundreds of acres close to Malpaso Creek thanks to the money he earned from those same westerns. By the time he filmed his first movie under Malpaso, Hang 'em High, he was producing the picture in addition to acting in it, and Clint Eastwood was no longer the TV man from Rawhide when it broke opening weekend records in 1968. he was very powerful. However, Eastwood's approach on site was what truly made him stand out. Eastwood gained notoriety for completing scenes in 1 or 2 takes, when other filmmakers would spend days refining a single scene. No shouting, no mayhem, just calm concentration. According to him, the first take frequently seemed the most alive and authentic. Actors soon discovered that they might not be given another shot if they didn't arrive prepared. It's one take, so you have to be prepared. According to Jeff Daniels, Matt Damon, he needed to plead for another one. However, it was successful. Eastwood used this technique to enable actresses like Gene Hackman and Hilary Swank deliver Oscar-winning performances. By the early 1990s, Clint Eastwood had already become a Hollywood icon. However, what followed would put him in a very other league. The Cuthore Killings was the original Western screenplay. Studios weren't exactly keen to pick it up. Francis Ford Coppola attempted to make it in the 1980s but was unsuccessful. However, Eastwood noticed something in it. After purchasing the rights, he simply waited. He wanted to physically grow into the job for years. The timing couldn't have been more ideal when he eventually filmed it as Unforgiven at the age of 62. Despite having a modest budget, the movie made $159 million and took home a number of Oscars. It was no ordinary film. It was a last sign of deference. In the credits, Eastwood also took care to pay tribute to his former mentors, Don Siegel and Sergio Leone. The gunslinger was now a legitimate filmmaker. A little more than 10 years later, he gambled once more. Studio executives were uneasy about Million Dollar Baby. It dealt with assisted suicide, a risky and terrible topic. Eastwood continued. Initially, Warner Brothers hardly gave it a decent release, perhaps anticipating its failure. However, the movie was a hit, making more than $216 million. After it won many Oscars, Eastwood's reputation as a director was elevated. He could not be stopped. It demonstrated his ability to touch audiences with difficult, weighty subjects. People started doubting his intuition after that. He had already rocked the business with Mystic River the year before. That film hit you in the stomach like a gradual burn. A murder case that seemed too real, damaged lives and childhood trauma. Eastwood maintained silence and concentration. There was no glitzy camera work, just unadulterated passion and a cast who gave it their all. When Tim Robbins and Sean Penn left with their Oscars, critics were finally able to express their thoughts aloud. Eastwood has become one of the world's most emotionally accurate filmmakers. Gran Torino then arrived. Nobody anticipated that Eastwood, who is over 80 years old, would produce one of his greatest successes. However, he did. Somehow, the tale of a sour, bigoted war veteran who becomes slightly softer to defend the neighbors he previously detested, struck the right emotional chord. The character resembled a worn-out version of every part Eastwood had previously performed. It was harsh, bitter, and strangely familiar, and viewers adored it. Still regarded as one of his late career highlights, the film earned $270 million. Critics even remarked on how his mere presence carried the movie, like Dirty Harry's spirit lurking under the surface. All of these achievements were the result of a unique approach. On set, Eastwood didn't yell, "Action." He didn't practice non-stop. Second chances were not something he believed in. Maybe 1 or 2 takes. That was it. His voice was quiet. He had faith in his performers, and it worked most of the time. Because yelling on a Western set used to frighten actors, Tom Hanks famously made a joke about Eastwood treating his players like horses. His trademark was his subtle control. The sets were quiet. There was a lot of pressure. However, the outcomes were self-evident. Although Clint Eastwood's life has always been in the public eye, there were aspects of it that he kept very secret, secrets that even he was unaware of. Laurie Murray was unaware of her biological father for the majority of her life. She never realized that her original father was one of the most well-known men in America since she was adopted and lived in Seattle, far from the Hollywood scene. Clint Eastwood was also unaware. He had a brief relationship with a lady in his 50s, but she never disclosed her pregnancy to him. When Laurie looked for her roots decades later, she discovered something that nobody had anticipated. Clint, who was in his 60s at the time, gave her a warm and calm welcome as she reached out. It turned into a connection rather than a controversy. She gradually joined the Eastwood family after they bonded over golf and vacation together. However, it wasn't until she confidently presented herself as Laurie Eastwood at the premiere of The Mule in 2018 that the public learned about it. In an instant, a 64-year-old secret came to light. But in Clint's world, secrets were commonplace. In 1959, he started a passionate relationship with stuntwoman Roxanne Tunis while he was married to Maggie Johnson. It lasted 14 years and wasn't simply a passing fancy. Everyone on the set was aware. It wasn't concealed. Kimber, their daughter, is the result of their romance. However, Eastwood also kept that out of the spotlight. Roxanne wasn't only a mistress, she remained with him even after the romance ended, because she genuinely cared for him. They remained near each other. Eastwood was devastated when she died in 2023. She had spent more than 60 years in his life. Sandra Locke followed. Their tale finished like a courtroom drama, but it started out like a Hollywood romance. Clint was still legally married for the 14 years they shared a home. Everything fell apart in 1989, when she came home to discover the Lockes had changed. She filed a lawsuit. Instead, he offered a studio agreement. She discovered that he had covertly paid for it in order to pressure her into giving in. This time she filed a fraud lawsuit. Clint was a different person in the courtroom. Angry, defensive, and obviously resentful. Although the matter was quietly settled, the harm was significant and long-lasting. Never again did that once powerful couple speak. Clint had begun another secret chapter while all of this was going on. He met Jaslyn Reeves, a flight attendant, in the early 1980s when he was still with Locke. Scott and Catherine, two more of his children, were born to her. According to their birth certificates, father refused. The public didn't know until 1990, when a tabloid revealed the facts. According to reports, Sandra Locke was also clueless. Jaslyn never brought him to court and kept everything under wraps. Never caused any trouble. However, family conflicts began to surface as the children grew older. Even decades later, things were still precarious. As demonstrated by Catherine's internet tirades and threats of legal action in 2024, Clint discovered something more stable in his final years. Her name was Sandera Christina. She wasn't a model or a celebrity. She was a hostess at his Carmel hotel. She never sought publicity and remained out of the spotlight when they first met in 2014. They supported one another, had quiet lives, and rarely showed up together. She operated an equestrian center with an emphasis on environmental conservation and animal welfare. She was genuine, grounded, quiet, and completely embraced by the Eastwood clan, according to people close to them. Clint was quietly and painfully devastated by her untimely death in 2024 from heart problems. His words were brief, but they had a profound effect on those who knew him. The 94-year-old man, who was formerly known for playing chilly loners, has suddenly softened in unexpected ways. He was a harsh, aloof, and unforgiving parent, but he's a completely different person as a grandfather. According to his daughter Francesca, he is kind, fun, and totally enamored with his grandchildren. He attends their games. He chuckles more. He doesn't care that he is standing amid younger parents and calling himself silly. He has earned the privilege of feeling emotional. Seeing his family flourish, messy, mixed, and flawed, seems to have given him a sense of calm that he had not experienced for the most of his life. Instead of Clint Eastwood, most individuals at 94 are slowing down, thinking back on their history, perhaps lounging in the sun, or taking lengthy naps. Juror number 2, the movie he recently finished directing, is hardly a melancholy departure. It poses a single horrifying question in this incisive, eerie thriller. What if the crime you are now sitting on a jury to decide was unintentionally created by you? In the film, Nicholas Holt's character has to deal with the nightmare. Clint, for some reason, still manages to make that tension seem genuine. As usual, he filmed the film quickly, neatly, and without any extraneous details. His senses are frighteningly precise, and his direction is tight even at 94, and his minimalistic approach as always. Clint is unadulterated. There is no wobbly hand or emotive slowness. This was thought to be his last endeavor. They did, of course. However, speculations began to circulate before the movie had even begun garnering media attention. For his next one, he has already cast the actors. Clint is secretly preparing another movie, even though the industry assumed he would ride off into the sunset with this one. He makes no mention of retiring. He avoids discussing his age. He simply doesn't stop working. That's all. The entertainment industry was rocked by an unexpected incident in late 2024. Clint Eastwood's YouTube interview about his movie Juror Number 2 abruptly disappeared from the site. No formal explanation, no copyright claim, and no warning were provided. Magnus, the host, claimed that the video simply vanished. Online rumors began to circulate after that. Given that Eastwood had made audacious remarks on political correctness and the #MeToo movement during the interview, many people assumed Warner Brothers was responsible for the removal. The odd timing was immediately noted by fans. As soon as the movie opened in a few cinemas, the interview disappeared. Some speculated that the company could be attempting to deflect attention from the film out of concern that Eastwood's candid opinions might provoke criticism. The matter swiftly escalated into a larger Hollywood free speech controversy. Eastwood's supporters contended that a man of his reputation, who is still active at the age of 90, ought to have the freedom to express his opinions without interference from a studio. Others speculated that there may have been covert legal or contractual motives. Clint Eastwood, who works at the age of 94 and doesn't slow down, was in the center of it all. Allison, his daughter, claims that Eastwood dislikes having a birthday party. He doesn't want anyone to even mention it. She previously claimed that throwing him a party never works and that all he wants is to work and enjoy life. Each time he turns it off. His attitude reveals a lot about his character. Eastwood has always prioritized the job over the publicity that accompanies it. He has never sought accolades or reveled in the limelight. He continues to go forward even now, when the majority of individuals his age are long retired. The most important lesson he taught Allison, who co-starred with him in a couple movies, was to not take life too seriously. Everything from his modest unwillingness to celebrate anniversaries to the fact that he still approaches film projects with the vigor of someone half his age, can be explained by that philosophy.